to instead become an office of problem solvers, where we survey the big threats facing our district and try to impact those threats both with impact cases and with education and outreach. So given that test, here's what I view as the top 6 priorities for the U.S. Attorney's Office. First, national security. National security must continue as the Department of Justice's #1 priority. And sadly, both foreign-based and domestic terrorism are significant threats in our home in northern Ohio. Next, and these aren't in any particular order, civil rights. Paul mentioned that I am the chairman of the Committee of U.S. Attorneys from throughout the country that advises the Attorney General on civil rights matters. And I can tell you from that experience that this is a national priority at this Department of Justice. As a civil rights lawyer for over a decade myself, and as the person who actually, as a line AUSA, handled these cases here, I can also tell you that civil rights enforcement must remain a priority in the year 2010 in Ohio as well. One particularly troubling thing that we have going on in our district now is the problem of human trafficking. In part, and I was surprised by that, but if you think it through, in part because of our geographical location and our sort of, we're at the nexus of the interstate highway system here in many ways. We have become a source state for what boils down to a modern day form of slavery. Next priority, financial and consumer fraud. The recent financial meltdown has shown us that threats to our American way of life and threats to our way of life in this community can be economic in addition to physical. And federal prosecutors have to continue to play an important role in making sure that our free market, which is the envy of the world, also remains a fair market. Fair market for all the people who live in our community. Here in Ohio specifically, we have an aging middle-class population, and they've fallen on hard times. And that means that efforts to protect consumers and investors are important, especially from scams and con artists who single them out and try to play on their fears and vulnerabilities because of where they are in life and because of where we are economically as a community now. Next priority is complex narcotics distribution. And I don't have to tell anybody in this room that drug dealing is at the heart of many problems facing our community and our youth. And while we cannot and should not try to replace the local law enforcement authorities' efforts in this area, we on the federal side need to work hand in hand with local police, and we need to add something to the equation. What we need to add is the ability to try to move up the distribution chain and to dismantle national and international drug organizations that ship this poison into our community for one reason and one reason alone, to make millions and millions of dollars, which they do. A particular threat that is now starting to evidence itself in our district is efforts to distribute pills. And this is called drug diversion, diverting prescription medication in large quantities in a very organized way through either pill mills or through very loose controls over the dangerous substances that we all know. So we're not talking about people going into, their mother's or grandmother's medicine cabinet and grabbing a couple Vicodin. We're talking about very organized drug distribution organizations that make millions of dollars off these drugs. Next priority is gun violence and organized crime. And again, we as the feds can't and shouldn't try to become street police. We should help, though, in devising a comprehensive strategy for reducing gun violence in this area. And part of that is not only taking illegal guns off the streets, but working to stop the flow of these guns, the distribution and trafficking in firearms before it gets to the bad guys out there in our communities. On the organized crime front, we're seeing a changing threat. We used to have traditional La Casa Nostra organized crime, and we still have some of that, but the real threat in our district now is an organized crime threat that emanates from abroad, from the former Soviet Union, from Eastern Europe, from Western Africa, organized criminal organizations, very sophisticated, using the internet, using computers, to steal intellectual property, to steal money, and to wreak havoc on our system. And then the last priority I want to talk about is public corruption. I personally spent many years of my life investigating and prosecuting these cases, and I prosecuted one of the last major corruption cases in our district. It was known then as the Nate Gray case. And as recent events show, corruption continues to present a major and serious threat to this district. Those cases are crucially important for this U.S. Attorney's Office and for this Department of Justice, because government can only work when it has the trust of the people. And only by holding corrupt public officials accountable can we seek to restore and keep that trust. So even stating those 6 priorities, and I could name many more, believe me, we face some very serious threats. And that is the bad news. The good news, as I have learned in the last year, is that we have in our district a tremendously talented and dedicated group of public servants in the federal law enforcement community, and specifically in the U.S. Attorney's Office, working day and night, and I do mean day and night, to address these issues. And I want to stress that again, because these individuals are public servants. They work for you. And I have the privilege of coming to work for this time as U.S. Attorney and seeing what they're doing every day. And I'm telling you that that fact should make you feel good. It is now, when times appear tough, that their example of public service is more important than ever. We cannot let those who would use their public office for personal gain define our community or define public service. And I submit to you, we don't need to. To me, there's no better way to prove my point than to tell you a little bit about the office and just a few of the career lawyers in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're going to kill me for doing this, by the way, who are tackling the priorities I outlined and tackling the threats facing your district. These people have chosen a career that is difficult, and it requires a lot of sacrifice, both in terms of time, certainly in terms of money, and more than both of those things in terms of stress. These are very, very high-stress jobs. So why do they do it? And why, with even all of these hardships and difficulties, could you not drag them out of this job with the crane? And the reason is simple. These people are basically idealistic people, and they get a tremendous amount of satisfaction and excitement in the work that they do. They have good jobs. And let me assure you, they're not getting rich from those jobs. In fact, most of the people who work for you as your assistant U.S. attorneys are passing up jobs that would pay them far more easily than they're making, and they're doing it to serve the greater good. Actually, a little-known fact is that your U.S. Attorney's Office actually pays for itself. That's right. We actually bring in more money every year than we cost you. Last year, for example, we brought in $17.7 million through fraudulent for actions getting back money that was taken from taxpayers by fraud, and that outpaced our budget of just over $17 million. So as I go through specifically the tremendous work done in this United States Attorney's Office to protect the community, you should keep in mind that you as taxpayers, and I hope all of you are actually paying your taxes, right, are getting all this great work at essentially no net cost. National security. So working side by side with the FBI, our national security lawyers have successfully prosecuted a homegrown terror cell out of Toledo, people convicted of planning to attack and kill American nationals abroad, 2 Chicago-based brothers who are convicted on terrorism-related charges, including planning to come to Cleveland for a meeting with like-minded individuals. And we currently have pending a terrorism support case